Yes! Hello, my beautiful friends. What an amazing day it is. Welcome back and happy Thursday. I hope your week has been outstanding thus far. We got one day left and then it is a Friday. We're excited about that, but it's not here yet. And we got some business to attend to today, starting with an Iran update. So, quick preview on what's coming up, then we'll zoom in on further details. We got some good filings. We got a motion to dismiss. We got some good back and forths on the 14th Amendment and other things. But we'll see what the Trump administration came out and said about Iran and this kerfuffle about whether or not the United States is going to be getting involved in this or not. And Trump came out with this 2-week announcement. But I also saw this report from this dude called Seymour Hersh. Seymour Hersh writes over on Substack, and of course, Mel clipped this over on X for us. And what's interesting about this post, which is from Seymour Hersh, is that it's from Seymour Hersh. This is the same dude who was pretty dang accurate on COVID and who was very accurate on the Nord Stream pipeline bombing. And so he's saying there's going to be some booming going on this weekend. So we'll see what he says, and you can make your own conclusions from it all. But then we've got some legal stuff to talk about, obviously. We got the Northern District of California in the Gavin Newsom case now got a new filing from the Trump DOJ, from Pete Hegseth, from the DOD. Of course, this is all about the National Guard. This went up on appeal. We saw that kid who just graduated high school arguing for Gavin Newsom recently. And now we've got this appeal that's working its way through. And this opposition came in on this case from Trump and the DOJ on behalf of the DOD. And there's a bunch of stuff in here, a bunch of exhibits. All right. So Gavin Newsom, who's already been on his heels since that Court of Appeals oral arguments that really didn't go well for him, now getting hit with essentially an opposition motion to the preliminary injunction, which would mean that his case would lose. So we'll go through that. We'll see what the Trump DOJ says, and then we'll see what Hegseth said, because he was getting into it with Pocahontas. She was sending out some serious smoke signals yesterday, and Hegseth was not having any of it. He said, all right, we're not going to be dealing with you, Poca. So we got that. Then we got Mike Johnson coming up to see what he says about the riots and the protests by foreign invaders in our state. So that's coming up. Then we'll turn our attention over to birthright citizenship, baby. We got the 14th Amendment, subject to the jurisdiction thereof. What does that mean? Well, we know what it means, but all the other courts apparently thus far have been trying to skate around this issue. And so Marco Rubio and the State Department submitted this motion to dismiss. This other group called the Asian Pacific American Advocates have come out, and they've said, everybody who's here who has a baby, that baby is a citizen, regardless of your status, regardless of whether you're here lawfully, illegally, whatever. And so Rubio is responding to that. So we'll go through that. We've got Comer talking about how non-citizens should not be allowed to vote in D.C. Homeland Security was out smashing a bunch of this illegal invader narrative. And we even got Caroline Leavitt, who is dunking on Jasmine Crockett, who I support for the Democrat presidential nominee. I'm endorsing her early. I support her. Set for the Democrat nominee, all right, just to be clear. Says we got Tom Homan coming up and more. Then we'll turn our attention to this Miranda Devine report, which was amazing. Shout out to Miranda Devine. She's got a great podcast going on too now. I don't know if you saw that, but it's pretty great. So check it out. She had Scott Bissett on yesterday. Anyways, so we got Miranda Devine. She came out with this new story about the FBI saying that they were trying to target Trump for the J6 choir, right? Remember the song? And the songs and the singing from the J6 choir in prison? Well, this was not something that the FBI appreciated, and they wanted to incriminate Trump for this. And so we got a whole report on it. Absolutely wild stuff. We've got more questions about Joe Biden and his total lack of any capacity at all. And so we got a couple senators here all coming up, and we're excited to get to it. And so the stream and the tubes have now warmed up, and it's very nice to have you here, confirming that everything's coming in and working before we start popping off. It's great to have you here. And by the way, we had a great members only stream this morning. And so if you haven't considered becoming a member, we'd love it if you did. This morning, we talked about all sorts of stuff. We talked about how Democrats are broke and in retreat, how they're just flailing. They've got no money. Ken Martin's doing a terrible job. And they're even retreating on the trans thing. Yeah, we talked about that. We also then read through a new lawsuit that Pam Bondi is unloading against the Democrat Andy Bashar. He is the Democrat who some people want to run out of Kentucky. Pam Bondi suing them and says, stop breaking federal law. You can't give illegal aliens in-state tuition benefits. And so that lawsuit we covered as well. And so shout out if you are a member. We appreciate you. Thank you for supporting our work. And if you haven't become a member, we'd love it if you joined us. And we'll see you on the next Membo stream. All right, so my friends, now let's get into the business on the day, starting right here. An update on Iran from the president. We had Caroline Leavitt come out today and read a message from your favorite president, number 47, on the future of America's involvement in Iran. And here is what she said.
Regarding the ongoing situation in Iran, I know there has been a lot of speculation amongst all of you in the media regarding the president's decision-making and whether or not the United States will be directly involved. In light of that news, I have a message directly from the president, and I quote, based on the fact that there's a substantial chance of negotiations that may or may not take place with Iran in the near future, I will make my decision whether or not to go within the next 2 weeks. That's a quote directly from the president for all of you today.
All right, so we'll make a decision in 2 weeks. Now, this reminds me of a lot of the tariff stuff. You got 30 days to negotiate, or we'll impose the tariff, and then there will be a pause on the tariff. So I've made my decision, but there'll be a pause on the decision. It's kind of, I think, follows that same pattern. And so we'll see if stuff gets done on America's behalf before those 2 weeks or not. But as it stands, 2 weeks to slow the spread, I guess, of weapons or something. So we'll, of course, keep our eye on that. Now, simultaneous to that announcement from the White House is this reporting, and I shared this with you because Seymour Hersh is, I think, a pretty credible person based on several of his reports that we've talked about here historically. We covered Seymour Hersh when he talked about the furin cleavage sites in the Frankenstein's monster COVID molecule. Remember, he was the guy who wrote an article that said, actually, you know, he like reassembled it. He's like, there's 4 pieces to this thing. One came from over here, one came from over here, and then we just assembled them together. And he also was the dude who I think broke the story on Nord Stream and how the Western countries did it. It wasn't Putin blowing up his own pipeline, which everybody knew from the beginning, except the pro-Ukraine flag maniacs. So we got Seymour Hersh who's responding there. He posted this over on Substack, and I would encourage you to go subscribe to him completely. This is brought to us courtesy of Mel on X, just a short snippet. Here's what he wrote. All right, this is a report on what is most likely to happen in Iran as early as this weekend, according to Israeli insiders and American officials I've relied upon for decades. It will entail heavy American bombing. I have vetted this report with a longtime U.S. official in Washington who told me that all will be under control if Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei departs. Just how that might happen, short of his assassination, is not known. There has been a great deal of talk about American firepower and targets inside Iran, but little practical thinking, as far as I can tell, about how to remove a revered religious leader with an enormous following. I've been told that the White House has signed off on an all-out bombing campaign in Iran, but the ultimate targets, the centrifuges buried at least 80 meters below the surface at Fordow, will, as of this writing, not be struck until the weekend. The delay has come at Trump's insistence because the president wants the shock of the bombing to be diminished as much as possible. By the opening of Wall Street trading on Monday, Trump took issue on social media today with a report from Wall Street Journal saying that he had already decided to attack Iran, and we did hear that, writing that he had yet to decide on a path forward. Now, Fordow is home to the remaining majority of Iran's most advanced centrifuges that have produced, according to recent reports, at least 900 pounds of uranium enriched to 60%, which is a short step from weapons grade levels, saying the planned weekend bombing will also have new targets, the bases of the Republican Guards, which have countered those campaigning against the revolutionary leadership since '79. Israeli leadership hopes, under Netanyahu, hopes the bombings will provide the means, quote, of creating an uprising against the current regime, which has shown little tolerance for those who defy religious leadership. Iranian police stations will be struck. Government offices that house files on suspected dissenters will also be attacked. Bringing back the Shah's son, now living in exile, has never been considered, I was told. But there has been talk among the White House planning group that includes J.D. Vance of installing a moderate religious leader to run the country if Khamenei is deposed. The Israelis bitterly objected to the idea. They don't give a crap on the religious issue, but they demand a political puppet to control. The longtime U.S. official said, "We are split with the Izzies on this. Result would be permanent hostility and future conflict in perpetuity. Bibi desperately trying to draw the U.S. in as their ally against all things Muslim, using the plight of the citizens as propaganda bait." So, all right. So that's an update and a report over there from Seymour Hersh. And you can draw your own conclusions on what to believe, but that guy has been accurate and inaccurate, to be clear on that. But I share that with you. I found it interesting and wanted to pass that along if you're interested. So that's what's happening. White House saying still have some stuff. And right, just because that's the plan doesn't mean it's going to happen. They got Trump, who's got to push that big red button. And we'll see if he does or not. So all that is cooking out there. And we'll see what happens over the weekend. Now, we've got some Gavin Newsom stuff and some National Guard battles that are brewing. Gavin Newsom having a tough time out there in California. Can't even build a train or a bathroom in San Francisco. It takes 20 years to do that. But he's also now having to deal with illegal invaders who he, for some reason, continues to have a fantasy are his constituents or something. Happy to have him just torching his entire cities down and his state, ripping it apart. Now he's sued President Trump, saying you have to remove all the National Guard who are protecting our state from our state. Now, we saw that after a lower level judge called Breyer approved the lawsuit from Gavin Newsom, that it went up to the Court of Appeals and they reversed Breyer. They said, okay, this guy's nuts, and said that you're stopped from stopping Trump. So the National Guard remained. Then this went up to the Court of Appeals, and we saw they sent that kid out of high school on his break in between gym sessions, and he came over and then did his oral arguments, and it didn't sound like it went too well for him either. So now Trump and the DOJ via Pete Hegseth have responded to Gavin Newsom, and this is their opposition to Gavin's attempt to get an injunction against them, which would be the court and the judge preventing Trump from using the National Guard in the state of California. So writing the following when we get into it, saying, after violent protests, judge, and disorder targeting immigration law enforcement operations shocked LA, Trump stepped in. And he exercised his authority to call into federal service members of the Guard to protect federal personnel and property. Protesters had, among other things, done a bunch of bad stuff, right? Throwing objects at federal security officers, used large commercial dumpsters to breach a federal complex, insurrection, used chairs and other items as weapons, insurrection, attacked federal officers for hours, insurrection, trapped one officer inside her vehicle while the crowd pummeled her car with stones, and she didn't shoot anybody in the neck, cut a perimeter fence that federal officials had constructed, breaching, launched incendiary devices at officers, Molotov cocktails and other things, lit fires in dumpsters and trash bins, vandalized a federal facility at the center of the protests, leaving the building security checkpoints in ruins. Indeed, LA police, even the chief, admitted they were overwhelmed, and things have gotten out of control. All of this at a whole different level than anything that happened on January 6th, which was a 3, maybe 4-hour riot. They were back in the building that night. Lectern guy moved the podium 2 feet. Woo! They had a meltdown, okay? They unleashed the FBI all over the entire country to kick in doors and round people up. But all of a sudden, Gavin Newsom and Mayor Bass and the Democrats like Van Hollen are hoisting these people up on their shoulders, even though they were launching incendiaries into the police. Now, on this record, Trump determined, I got to do something about this, saying the federal government can get in here and do an act. The purpose is limited to the protection of a couple things: federal personnel and property that are under siege by these foreign aggressors, challenging the nation's authority to remove illegal aliens, And even, right, even the so-called peaceful protesters, they don't have to be throwing a Molotov cocktail. If they're standing there obstructing the operation of federal agents, standing there with a sign, and there's like 50 of them blocking a van or something like that, you might call that civil disobedience and whatever. It's still obstruction. If MAGA was doing that when a J6er was being rounded up or something like that illegally for peacefully protesting in the Capitol building, which is the People's House, and so on, right? And they were waved in there, tapped on the shoulders by cops to come in. What would they do? Would they just sit around and say, oh, those are peaceful protesters stopping enforcement of federal law? No. So why do illegal aliens get the benefit of the doubt? Oh, that's because they get a premium version of America where they get extra due process, no real requirements or responsibilities, free healthcare, free education, and then margaritas with senators who come down there and have foot massages for them in their prison cells. Congress has required the executive to carry out these removal operations. Congress ordered us to do it. We got two branches of government here, which are effectuated by dedicated public servants who are doing their jobs. Now, the state of California and Gavin responded to this lawlessness by politicizing Trump's protection of federal property and personnel. And their lawsuit, Gavin, is meritless. To start, it intrudes upon the president's unreviewable discretion. SCOTUS long ago held that when the president exercises authority vested in him by Congress to call forth the militia, it is his exclusive discretion by law. Thus, you, judge, and this court has no authority to second guess the president's judgment. But even if this determination were not committed to the president's discretion, the president still has every right to mobilize the National Guard and the Marines to quell violence impeding enforcement of federal law, as well as protect federal agents and property from violent mobs that local authorities cannot or choose not to control. Congress has empowered the president to handle these things, especially when there is a rebellion or danger of a rebellion against the authority of the government of the United States, which is literally what's happening. And they're waving foreign flags in their mechanism of obstruction. Now, both statutory elements are met here, either of which authorize the President Trump to use the National Guard. Violent actions of uncontrolled mobs undertaken to disrupt the enforcement of law constitutes a rebellion, or at least the danger of a rebellion against federal authority. We're not going to let that happen. It's a rebellion. It's an invasion. We had it endorsed by the president of the Senate in Mexico, who held up a map showing this is ours, and it is not. Honor your treaties. We paid for that. And as intended, these violent actions have impeded the ability of federal officials to enforce the law. Now, in granting a temporary restraining order, this court got stayed, but we still have to battle over it. This court nonetheless concluded that neither of these conditions were satisfied. Trump can't do either of those things. You haven't met the rules. What are you talking about? Rebellion? No, these are just peaceful protesters. All they're doing is eating pupusas together. The court's determinations that the term rebellion does not encompass violent resistance to the government has no basis in the law. What are you talking about? It's literally the definition. As for the court's apparent interpretation, they say that this section is totally inapplicable to mob violence. There's no support in the statute for this. And any of these interpretations from this Judge Breyer would paralyze the president. That's not what the statute enables. So in addition, Newsom's argument that the relevant orders failed to comply with the law because they were not coming through the governor, right, which we heard that get talked about a lot in the Court of Appeals, has no merit. But even if there were a procedural error, it was harmless, and it would be grossly inequitable to say that we didn't send Gavin a memo, and so therefore we have to withdraw the guard. That would be ridiculous. All of the things that Trump did are valid. There are no 10th Amendment concerns. There is no posse comitatus problem. And all of the remaining factors support the president as well. If you say that the executive branch has to get rid of the National Guard, you're going to threaten the safety of law enforcement officers. You're going to threaten the safety of public. In California, the deployment of the National Guard has been critical to the protection of federal personnel and property historically, and the balance of the equity strongly weigh in our favor. And contrary to their theory that we caused the escalation, not true at all. Rioters continue to object to ICE enforcing the law, and they're going to continue to target our facilities And that's why we had to act. And so what's going to happen now, if you remove us, is cause concrete harm. And we cannot allow that to happen. The balance of the harms favors Trump and the government. So do not force the National Guard to go. Background. Trump writes, the Constitution authorizes Congress to provide for calling forth the militia, right? U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15. The National Guard, which is part of the organized militia, according to the U.S. Code, consists of two overlapping but legally distinct organizations, right? So now we're going back to the root source. Where does the National Guard power even come from? Oh, well, it's from the militia power. Well, who has that? Oh, Congress does, not the president. Wait, I thought the National Guard was just called in by Trump. He's not Congress. Well, so we have to follow the bouncing ball. Where did it originate from? Article 1, the legislative branch has it, but they're going to delegate it like they always do. So as we'll see, they say illegally distinct organizations. Okay, we got the National Guard, which is a federal entity, and the state National Guard. Writing, since 1933, all persons who have enlisted in a state guard have also enlisted in the National Guard. In the latter capacity, when they became a part of the Reserve Corps, unless until ordered as active duty, they were part of the state, right? So when you join in, it sounds like you are part of both, but you're activated for the state. But we can also just turn on the switch and now you're activated for us. Now, while ordered into federal service, members of the National Guard lose their status as members of the state militia, right? So, state feds go on, state goes off. Now you're ours. Now, and becomes federal soldiers with the president as the commander-in-chief of those forces. That's how the statutes and how the Supreme Court, here it says, has interpreted this in this case called perpich. Now, section 12406 is one part of the law that permits the federalization of the guardsmen. The statute traces back to 1792, and that is when President Washington responded to the Whiskey Rebellion. Now it's been modified. So we codified it. We started to turn, these other kind of various acts into the U.S. Code. We got everything organized, created the U.S. Code, put things, Title 18's over here and all the things. So, here we added this, kind of modified this based on what we passed back in the late 1700s. Said whenever the United States is invaded, as we're being invaded now, openly, or there is a rebellion or danger of a rebellion against the authority of the government of the United States, which I think would also apply because it's federal agents trying to enforce the law, or the president is unable with regular force to execute the laws, the president may, right? U.S. Code wrote this, the president may call into federal service members of the National Guard for the purposes of rebelling or suppressing the rebellion, repel the invasion or suppress the rebellion. Got it. Orders for those purposes shall be issued through the governors of the states, or in the case of D.C., through the commanding general, and the president federalizes them. So what happened here is on Friday, June 6, officers from ICE conducted operations in LA. A crowd gathered at an enforcement site and tried to prevent ICE from enforcing the law by throwing objects at ICE vehicles. Now, just because you threw something, yes, that makes you a suspected criminal because that's assault on a federal officer. And many J6ers got hunted down for less than this, for less than that at all. Not throwing anything. You threw something and it hit a cop. Proud Boys got charged with throwing a water bottle. That was one of their assaults. So whether it was frozen or not, I don't know. They'd probably say it was. Proud Boys would say it wasn't, but the cops. So several individuals were arrested in operation. We'll see if the rest are identified and hunted down like the J6ers were, and brought an ERO to the federal facility in downtown. They said, you basically blocking, right? And just because you're throwing something, that obviously puts you in one category. But if you're still there and standing there and the vehicle cannot go by and you're one of 1,000 people who are all there blocking the road, that's a flash mob of obstruction. So they should be tracked and arrested, just like the prior precedent, because no one's above the law. Now, at around 5 p.m. that night, a crowd gathered there and protest turned violent. The violence spread across the downtown, and they're blocking gates, they're blocking doorways, entries and exits, not just blocking the streets, blocking the operation and functionality of the facility. That should be obstruction. Arrest them. Protesters pinned down several services officers who were left severely outnumbered while trying to defend a parking garage connected to several buildings. Protesters threw concrete chunks, bottles of liquid, disgusting kinds of liquids probably, and other objects at officers in a sustained assault repeatedly. They also attempted to use a large rolling commercial dumpster as a battering ram to breach the parking garage, causing damage to federal property. These protests were explicitly about the immigration raids. Now, Newsom and the judge it's mostly peaceful. Bigots. Officer feared for their safety, as we got in the declarations. In fact, ICE and Homeland Security officers responded to support these officers under siege, and they attempted to use non-lethal force to disperse the crowd. Yeah, unlike Lieutenant, Boyd, who just decided to shoot some woman in the neck, who is Ashley Babbitt. The federal officers managed to prevent a breach of the facility, but it took LAPD officers 90 minutes to arrive, finally pushed the crowd back. Meanwhile, the protest turned extremely violent. One news report shows demonstrators using chairs, dumpsters, and other weapons. Once on the scene, LAPD declared an unlawful assembly, 7 p.m., ordered the protesters to disperse. Many did not. They began attacking LAPD officers. The scene was not even cleared until 11 p.m. that night, leaving extensive damage to multiple buildings. That night, Trump called Gavin. He said, listen, Gavin, to discuss the dangers to federal personnel. And he requested that Gavin take action to stop the violence. But the violence intensified. The next day, large crowds congregated around a Homeland office. In the Paramount neighborhood, the crowd blocked traffic, began to attack the immigration officers. 7 hours, double, January 6th, of nonstop fighting between federal officers and protesters ensued. The crowd boxed in federal officers, surrounded an officer's vehicles, which they pummeled with stones. They launched mortar-style fireworks. They set at least one vehicle on fire. They threw objects of all nature at the cops. Rioters also breached the perimeter fence of the federal building, damaged vehicles, mortar-style fireworks, multiple explosions happening at federal officers. Did you see all that on January 6th? Molotovs being thrown to burn buildings down? You see that? No, think so. Senator John Fetterman, among others, called it anarchy and true chaos. John's right sometimes. Protests continued into the weekend. Protesters blocked the 101 freeway, lit dumpsters on fire, set off commercial-grade fireworks towards federal officers, damaged federal buildings, ruined a federal building security checkpoint, severely injured federal officers. Downtown LA was operating on significantly restricted access because they took over the whole state, or the whole region, rather, and have been severely damaged and vandalized. Lost total control, Gavin. So then Trump says, all right, you're terrible at this, man. Your state's a disaster. Trump federalized 2,000 members of the National Guard. Said, all right, go and clean it up. Then they informed the adjutant general that Trump was going to mobilize this. 30 minutes later, they told that we got news of this, relayed the news, we're going to mobilize these people. The two spoke again after another half hour, and the general confirmed that the state of California would comply with the orders, come through. Then, at 8:13, Newsom announced that Trump is taking over. Trump is deploying the 2,000 National Guards, and he criticized Trump. He says this is the wrong mission. But at the time, Gavin didn't even object to Trump, didn't come out and say anything about it. It's like, I'm going, well, they're kind of burning our whole city down. So then the CNGB and the Adjutant General spoke twice more to coordinate the deployment orders before they were even formally relayed. Later that night, we then transmitted to a bunch of other people Trump's memo, as well as a memo from Hegseth. Hegseth's memo bore the label, through the governor. Now, based on the president's invocation of this, we were directing the general to effectuate the invocation of the National Guard. DOD transmitted the memo, right? We're seeing how this memo got created. Then on Monday, Hegseth issued a second memo, activating another 2,000. The memo was also transmitted to Newsom's office, and they knew what was coming. Now, since the call to action, Guardsmen and Marines have gone in there, and they've done their jobs. The Guardsmen and Marines establish outside perimeters observation posts, presence patrols. They provide personnel protection. They enable federal law enforcement officers to do their jobs. The Marines temporarily detained one individual as a protective measure after that guy tried to enter restricted areas. Now, the violence has since continued at federal facilities across California. In fact, on June 14th, a crowd of 1,000 people gathered outside the federal building and the U.S. courthouse, and some assaulted law enforcement officers with rocks, bricks, bottles, fireworks, and other objects. Some protesters threw red paint on FPS and federal officers and National Guards members. Protesters at the LA Federal Building also blocked the parking garage exits, preventing ICE from even exiting. But more importantly, the presence of the National Guard and the Marines has played an essential role in protecting federal property, and we're going to continue to do that, saying we followed the law, explaining the president's determinations are his exclusive jurisdiction. In fact, President Madison, rewind the clock back to the War of 1812, they said he could make these decisions. He had activated the state militia pursuant to a 1795 law. And they said that the authority to activate the militia must be confided to the president. The judges don't have the ability to act as the president. There's no basis in the statute for either the court or the plaintiffs any ability to second guess Trump's determination whether something is actually a rebellion or whether the federal government does actually have the authority to do certain things. And by the way, it also implicates the political question doctrine, which is another interesting component that we haven't talked about on this case yet. This is the idea, the question comes up a lot. Can you just sue the government because they're violating your rights? No, not unless you're an illegal alien, of course. Then you can. They'll do whatever you want. If you're a federal judge or Amy Coney Barrett, they love you. Anyways, but if you're a citizen and you're like, hey, you can't shut my business down or fire me unless I take this jab or any of these things, they say, shut up. Stop your complaining, peasant. Oh, I'm going to sue you. You can't. It's a political question. We don't handle political questions in these courts, so get out of here and go sue. Actually, you can't sue. Go vote for someone. Well, this is weird. I thought I lived in a free country. You don't. Brought to you by Pfizer. Thus, if the act of an official is one where the executive possesses the discretion, then it is a decision for the executive, right? In other words, these are political questions. Like these people saying that if you're unhappy with what Trump did, go impeach him, all right? You have Congress, go impeach him and get mad. Otherwise, you can't substitute a judge's judgment in for the president's. And the necessary conditions existed. This is a foreign invasion. They're waving foreign flags around, interfering and obstructing with federal law. Trump explained that recent acts of violence against ICE impede faithful execution and operation of immigration law. And there's no serious debate about this. This is a dangerous condition. In fact, even LAPD Chief Jim McDonnell publicly acknowledged that the LAPD was overwhelmed. He said things have gotten out of control. Quote, somebody could easily be killed. In addition to all of this, they also torched the federal courthouse and are throwing objects at law enforcement. They're setting fires. It is impeding, damaging our vehicles, Molotov cocktails, looting, burning a vehicle, and vandalizing property, all in the exhibits attached. Now, their submission also reflects the reality here, that the crowd is refusing to comply with local authorities, which is why we have to come in here. Now, the word rebellion, in case you forgot, Judge, it means open resistance or opposition to an authority or tradition. Look at Black's Law Dictionary. It means disobedience of a legal command or summons. And a bunch of other dictionary definitions, Webster's, okay, the Cyclopedic Dictionary, the American Dictionary of the English Language. Just look it up. All of it says that rebellion is very simple. You ignore these definitions, but you highlight some other narrow definition. Rebellion means open resistance to lawful authority, forcible opposition, resistance to the laws, to the process that is legitimate and lawfully installed. Look, deliberate, organized resistance by force and arms to the laws or operations of the government. Everywhere, okay? Rebellion. You're opposing the lawful execution of a government. They say no. It has to be conducted by an established government or ruler, which I think you can make the argument. You can say, well, I mean, it's endorsed by Scheinbaum down there in Mexico. She says if we tax their remittances, which is our money going into their economy, then she's going to say that they should mobilize. The president of the Senate down there held up the map. This is our land now because we don't honor our treaties, even though we got paid like $500 million in modern times. Dollars. Don't care, right? So you can even make that argument, but it's actually not the definition. Rebellion is not that high. Like it doesn't have to be, hi, I'm Claudia Scheinbaum and I approve a rebellion. That's not what we're talking about. Congress did not limit this to efforts to overthrow a government. Don't have to take over the entire system. They're just obstructing operation that's lawful. This would senselessly make the president's authority to mobilize the National Guard turn on the mob state of mind, and it would exclude perhaps the most well-known rebellion in American history, the Whiskey Rebellion, which was suppressed when Washington called up the militia under a predecessor statute. Now, the Whiskey Rebellion's object was to oppose a collection of a particular tax, not to overthrow the government. Now, to be sure, Washington took that action under a 1792 statute that did not by its terms refer to rebellion. But it would have been wholly uncontroversial back then to refer to the Whiskey Rebellion as a rebellion, but they were going to try to take over America. They were just rebelling against the tax. And so if you use their definition, you're going to usurp authority from the English language, all right? The definition of rebellion has been met. Rioters were violent and armed. The court recounted bad actors were armed with fireworks, rocks, mangoes, oh no, concrete, chairs, and bottles of liquid, probably disgusting, illegal alien invader liquids. Others threw rocks and other objects, including a Molotov cocktail. And the mangoes could have been delicious. You don't know. Anyways, but some people on June 8th also set off fireworks, fired paintballs, mobs besieged federal buildings, commercial dumpsters, battering rams, numerous injuries. We know, we saw it. The demonstrators and their resistance was open. In fact, many of them said, it's time to eliminate ICE. It's death to ICE. They said they wanted to eliminate Trump. Leaving no ambiguity as to the purpose of their actions, they organized themselves through social media, and we'll see if they get rounded up by the FBI as seditious conspirators, because they also use social media to incriminate J6ers and the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers. Posting the locations of federal law enforcement employees so they can construct their flash mobs, which is a group of obstructionists. Now, at the TRO phase, this court stated there's little evidence of whether it's violent or not. But that's ridiculous, Judge. You know what's going on. Even if the situation in LA had not risen to the level of a rebellion, the standard is not even an actual rebellion. If there's a danger of a rebellion, we can even do that. Congress did not require Trump to wait for the president, an actual rebellion to materialize before you can deploy. Only once they've actually seized a certain portion of land, then you can go and respond. Makes no sense. Has never been the way this works. And so they were not able to control their land and their state. That's why we had to step in. Trump complied with all of the procedural requirements. It's common practice to communicate the way that we practiced and communicated. 30 minutes after we alerted the general that we were going to mobilize the guard, they spoke again and again. After another half hour, they all knew about it. They read the statute to say that we have to consult with Gavin and get his opinion and get his consent. That is not right at all. The court didn't even force that standard. Through a third party, is not an invitation to have a conversation about it. But in any event, Trump did discuss the situation with him and sent memos, and everything was going on legally and appropriately, and we followed the procedures. Now, as they wrap this up, they tell us that you should not have an injunction here. You should allow us to continue to exercise the National Guard. We had pinned down people. Federal buildings were heavily vandalized, 7 hours of nonstop fighting. They set fires to vehicles with propane tanks. They engaged in looting. Numerous federal officers and agents were injured, among other mayhem. And we've established why we need to be here. Any of your suppositions judged to the opposite are contrary to the record. There is violence. They were using dumpsters and battering rams to knock these doors down. And removing the National Guard is not going to de-escalate anything. All you're doing is removing protections for federal officials and property, and we are not letting up on enforcing the law. Now, if we keep them here, there are no real harms for you other than a nice, safe city. And so, in conclusion, we say that this judge and this court should deny Gavi's Newsom for a preliminary injunction and find in favor of Trump. Nice filing here from Christopher D. Edelman. I think that it's going to go in Trump's favor ultimately at the end of the day, especially after we saw what happened in the Court of Appeals, where they were asking about these same questions. How is it not within the president's power to do to invoke the National Guard if it's been done historically for very similar things? And the objections are based on a definition that is inaccurate, which is rebellion, and the definition of through. So it's like, you didn't check that box. So the city gets to burn down now. Thanks for playing the game. Gavin Newsom wins. California, amazing. Whoa, illegals. So we'll see what happens on this. Of course, we got some reaction. Pete Hegseth got into this with Pocahontas, who went nuts. And here is what she said today when she got into it with Hegseth.
Secretary Hegseth, if the president wanted to deploy Marines to Chicago and New York City like he did in Los Angeles, would you carry out that order even if the local governors and mayors objected?
Well, Senator, because Governor Newsom was unwilling to address
that's not
protecting federal law enforcement agents in Los Angeles, President Trump had all the authorities, and the Defense Department happily supported defending our ICE agents in the conduct of their job. They have the right, as Americans, to be able to do their job without being attacked by mobs. And we will protect them in that process. If other states needed it, we would provide that.
I know that you heard my questions. So you would be willing to send troops if the president ordered it to Chicago, New York City? That's right.
Well, thankfully, New York City, unlike California, unlike Gavin Newsom, is willing to step up and address the issue with their local law enforcement.
I will take that as a yes. How about if the...
Well, if illegal alien invaders, Liz, are burning federal buildings in New York or Chicago and torching states, federal property in their states, waving foreign flags around, and they refuse to secure the safety and security of other American citizens who don't want that going on in their states, then yeah, of course he'll send them in there.
The president says he wants to send troops to 15 cities. Would you be willing to do that?
Senator, I don't accept your hypothetical because it's
That's a hypothetical.
Not a real
That's
one.
the question. You're the Secretary of Defense. Would you send troops to 15 cities if the president said do it? Would you do it? 15 cities.
Again, Senator, it's a complete hypothetical lacking any context
Look,
at all.
You're the Secretary
and I refuse
of
to
Defense.
box myself in based on questioning on a hypothetical.
But you're here asking for $1 trillion, and I want to know how you're going to spend it. And so my question is, if Donald Trump tells you to send troops to 15 American cities, are you going to spend the money and send the troops?
Thankfully, we're spending money on securing our southern border, a way the previous administration abandoned and allowed 21 million illegals to enter our country. So defending our homeland is a real serious priority under this administration, and we're doing it.
I understand the question about defense. Secretary Hegseth, about 4,000 National Guard troops and 700 Marines have been sent to LA. Is there a number of troops deployed to American cities over the objections of governors and mayors at which you would be concerned that we are undermining our national defense?
Senator, we've spent 2 decades guarding other people's borders. We think at the Defense Department it's about time we shore up ours.
So that's my question. Is there a number at which sending those troops to Los Angeles or Chicago or New York starts to undermine our ability to defend ourselves around the globe? Is there a number?
Senator, we look at capabilities and readiness around the globe all the time, and we're quite satisfied with our capabilities to defend the homeland, and we'll provide more if and when it's necessary.
So you are satisfied with our capabilities. Let me just ask, have you actually done the analysis and figured out how many troops you can deploy domestically before you start to undermine
92
readiness
million.
around the world? Have you done that analysis?
Wrong topic, sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
Then would you let the rest of us in on it? We are the Senate Armed Services Committee, and you're here to ask for $1 trillion. What's the number?
We've got contingencies and plans for any number of capabilities should governors be unable, as Gavin Newsom has been, to actually secure his own federal agents in their cities.
How many troops can you deploy domestically before you start to cut into our readiness internationally?
As I said, previous administrations deployed our National Guard all around the globe in numbers far beyond what we were capable of supporting. So limited contingencies inside the United States to protect federal law enforcement is
doable. If the Supreme Court orders you
doable.
to remove troops from American city streets, will you do so?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. If the Supreme Court orders you to remove troops from American cities, will you do so?
As I've said, Senator, I don't believe district courts should determine national security policy, but if the Supreme Court rules on a topic, we will abide by that.
Okay.
Nicely done there, Pete. And that line about, it's about time we start focusing on our own borders was very much appreciated. So thank you to Pete Hegseth for that. Getting into it with high cheekbones. 1/10/24th genetically certified Native American Pocahontas. She's just an inspiration. Now here's Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House. He came out, he was talking about what's going on in these blue sanctuary jurisdictions. Speaker Johnson explaining what should be happening in these Democrat bastions of illegality.
Well, I tell you what, they've got a very difficult job here in this deep blue territory with a mayor who is on the wrong side of the law. And they're doing everything they can. It's a patriotic duty. They're understaffed. They're overwhelmed with the workload. They're trying to go after the dangerous criminal illegal aliens that are in the country harming American citizens. The mayor of Chicago thinks that is an ill-conceived mission. What is he talking about? It's madness. They have to do the job, and they need to do it better. We're working on the one big beautiful bill to allow them the resources that are desperately needed. I mean, they are doing the job. The border is secured. We are locked down. We're not allowing illegals into the country anymore. But the enforcement and removal of the dangerous people who got here is an essential task for our ICE agents and officers to take care of. They need more personnel. They need more facilities. We're here to see it.
Yeah, well, sanctuary cities all across the country are having a real difficult time trying to figure out how to deal with this whole situation. And I think you mentioned Mayor Johnson from Chicago, who we saw earlier this week was focused on rhymes, repeating to the crowd multiple times, supporting the black is not a criminal act, or something like that. That was his new policy over there in Chicago. So I don't know what all the illegal aliens they are going to say about that, but that's what Congress is having to grapple with. So we'll keep our eye, of course, on that one. Shout out to Hegseth. We'll see where the judge goes on this one. I think that ultimately this Judge Breyer is going to have a difficult time with this case and will probably do everything he can to find in favor of Newsom, but he's probably going to get told by the Court of Appeals the Ninth Circuit didn't seem to be buying anything that Newsom was shoving down their gullet, because you could imagine they don't want their cities burning down either. All right, so got that update. Now let's turn our attention over to birthright citizenship, because this is another battle that is brewing. Birthright citizenship is supposed to be for American citizens, not illegal aliens who have invaded our country. This is from the DOJ and Marco Rubio, who's gotten sued as a defendant by the Asian Pacific American Advocates, the OCA organization, amongst others, on this issue over the 14th Amendment, birthright citizenship. If you're here in this country and you are not a citizen and you're here illegally, or if you're here temporarily and you have a baby, does that make your baby automatically a citizen of the country because they're subject to the jurisdiction thereof? Rubio says no, it doesn't. And he submitted this motion to dismiss the lawsuit brought against him, saying, first of all, these Asian Pacific American Advocates, the APAs, they don't have standing, by the way, and all of the 14th Amendment jurisprudence is wrong, has been misinterpreted, and actually says that it only applies to lawful permanent residents. Here is what came down from the DOJ, happening in the District of Columbia, writing the following. All right, Judge, from Trump's DOJ in a motion to dismiss or to win the case via summary judgment. Your Honor, the Citizenship Clause of the 14th Amendment says this: all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the states wherein they reside. 14th Amendment, Section 1, this is the key phrase, subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Trump won. January 20th, Trump came in and said, actually, here's what the meaning of that phrase is. It recognizes that the Constitution does not actually, via the 14th Amendment, grant birthright citizenship to the children of non-citizens who are unlawfully present in the United States, okay? So that's one. So if you're in one bucket, you're here illegally, or if you're a non-citizen and you're here temporarily, right? It's like on a visa, some other temporary thing. If you're a lawful permanent resident with a green card, or you've got like a parent who's here and you're lawfully here, not in violation of federal law, then you would count as having birthright citizenship. Explaining, text, history, and precedent support what common sense compels. The Constitution does not harbor a windfall clause. You don't get to break into our country and then pop out a baby and gain a windfall to those who have circumvented or outright defied federal immigration laws. And there's a whole concept called birth tourism, where people from China will send a pregnant mom over to the United States, plop a baby out, boom, that kid has American citizenship. Plaintiff is Asian Pacific American Advocates. It's a nonprofit organization, probably fueled by some USAID money or whatever, filed on January 31st, 11 days after Trump issued his order. He said, this is illegal. We want our kids to be automatic citizens. Nor, they say, first of all, they don't even have standing, all right? Their dramatic assertions about Trump's order can't substitute for any standing. Like, they can say whatever they want about this order and be upset about it, but that doesn't mean they have any harm that's happened to them as a representative body or an organizational body, so they have no standing. They also haven't established that they're entitled to a declaration that the executive order is unconstitutional. And so if you just look at their complaint, it's so bad that we should win. There should be summary judgment granted to the DOJ because it's pretty clear. As was apparent at the time of its enactment, the Citizenship Clause in the 14th Amendment, subject to the jurisdiction, contemplates something much more than just being subject to the regulatory power. They said, well, we are subject to the jurisdiction. Like, we come in here, we have to follow your laws. You didn't follow the laws when you came in. That's why you came in illegally. So because we can put you in jail doesn't mean that you have subjected yourself voluntarily to our jurisdiction and that we've entered into that agreement. It conveys that persons must be completely subject to the political jurisdiction. That's what it meant. Have a direct and immediate allegiance to this country, unqualified by an allegiance to some other foreign power. Part of this, the situation was we didn't want stateless babies. Like, we didn't want people having babies that didn't have a state. that didn't have a country. They do. They've got their home countries now, right? This was a different time where they were still in this expansionist territory, right? The Mexicans didn't even declare their independence until like 1812. So like there's a lot going on. This is back in 1884. It was when this case came out. Now, just as that does not hold for children of diplomats or occupying enemies, it similarly does not hold for children of foreigners who were here temporarily, right? They're fleshing all this out in the aftermath of the 14th Amendment, which came out right after the Civil War. Now, although the NGO or nonprofit organization, although they say the executive order upends well-settled law, it is their reading that is overly broad that conflates the law. Not only is it inconsistent with the Supreme Court, in fact, the children of tribal Indians did not fall within the clause, right? Children of tribal Indians are not subject to the jurisdiction in the same way because they're subject to the jurisdiction of their tribe, even though they were subject to the regulatory powers of the United States. But it would still render the Civil Rights Act also unconstitutional just 2 years after it passed, because the Civil Rights Act said citizenship was covering those born in the United States not subject to any foreign power. So that Civil Rights Act of 1866 then got essentially codified into the 14th Amendment. The Citizenship Clause of the 14th was an effort to constitutionalize that, put it in the Constitution. So then they rely on Wong Kim Ark, another case which came after the Elk case, after it in 1898. The court there, which we've read here, was careful to cabin its holding to actual children of those with a permanent domicile and residence, right? Wong Kim Ark, his parents were from China, but they were living lawfully in California. He was born, he got citizenship because they weren't going back home, they were here permanently. Reading that decision to leave open the question is here, right? You could say it's an open question. So in the background, we know Trump issued the executive order. Trump said those two categories are, again, not citizens by operation of law. Now, as for enforcement, it directs the heads of all federal agencies to issue public guidance and create the enforcement rules. January 30th, they sued, saying, how dare you? And so since they're going to lose, we're filing a motion to dismiss. And here are the bases for motions to dismiss. They say, the court, you should dismiss this because they lack standing. They have to meet certain requirements to have standing, and they don't. This organization cannot establish standing because they want to vindicate their own preferences. There has to be a harm. Here, they fail. Nothing in the complaint supports the conclusion that this is impairing their ability to provide services to their constituency. Any attempt for them to have representational standing also fares no better. They're going to lose that too. So they should be just laughed out of here. But also, the president should also be dismissed from this. You don't have the jurisdiction to enjoin the president. You're not a supreme branch of government that overrides the presidency. And you failed to state a claim. None of these counts are even sufficient. You're trying to sue under the APA. All of this is not even a valid claim. This type of review is not allowed for these types of claims. You can sue in other mechanisms, using other mechanisms and other provisions, and we should win via summary judgment. Now, even assuming you've got standing or jurisdiction here, we should still win. The Citizenship Clause is very clear. It says subject to the jurisdiction thereof. We have met the constitutional provisions. Jurisdiction does not refer to regulatory power. The term jurisdiction should not be interpreted to conflict with other precedents. For example, the Supreme Court has held that children of members of Indian tribes owing immediate allegiance to those tribes are not citizens by birth, but members of Indian tribes and their children are plainly subject to the regulatory power of the United States. You can't just go do whatever you want and break all laws in America and just say, well, I'm sorry, I'm an Indian. I'm a Native American. And you're separate. So yeah, we can regulate, but you're not a citizen here. Now, it is thoroughly established that Congress has plenary authority over the Indians and their tribal relations. Congress may regulate Indian commercial activities and Indian adoptions, and the United States, there it is, may punish Indians for crimes. If the term subject to the jurisdiction means you're just subject to the law, then all of those cases, right, this case and 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 this case, which say that the Indians have some modicum of separation and have some recognition of their own tribes, would all be erased. In fact, this incorrect reading of the citizenship clause cannot explain the exception to the birthright citizenship for foreign sovereigns and their ministers. What if you're just a foreign ambassador? You come over here for a week, you and your wife drop a baby here, automatically a citizen? No. That's not how it works. Although foreign leaders and diplomats have traditionally enjoyed immunity, the Constitution allows Congress to abrogate that immunity or to make exceptions. And to the extent that they argue that children of foreign leaders are not subject to the jurisdiction, their theory would allow Congress to turn the citizenship clause on and off. And because the United States is sovereign over its territory, everyone who is born and so present would be subject to some regulatory authority. And so jurisdiction is not regulatory authority. It means allegiance, and you're under the protection of the country. That allegiance must be direct, immediate, complete, unqualified by any allegiance to any other country. They're here waving around their Mexican flags and Guatemalan flags. That has a lot of background, okay? Months before Congress passed the 14th, we had the Civil Rights Act of 1866. The act served as the blueprint for the 14th Amendment. The act said all persons born in the United States and not subject to any foreign power, excluding Indians not taxed, are citizens, declared, are hereby declared. There's no reason to read the phrase subject to the jurisdiction thereof as broader than that. Anything broader than just not subject to the jurisdiction of a foreign power. Even debates on this shared this same understanding. In fact, during the time in 1866, Senator Lyman Trumbull explained, well, the purpose of this was to make citizens of everybody born in the United States who owed allegiance to the United States, just coming after a civil war. Trumbull went on to equate being subject to our jurisdiction as owing allegiance solely to the United States. Even Senator Johnson, Reverendy, agreed. Although this amendment provides, all that it provides is that all persons born in the United States and not subject to some foreign power shall be considered citizens. And this is logical. Under the common law, a person owes allegiance to a country where they're domiciled, and a person domiciled in a country owes allegiance to the country. And that's what we're talking about in Wong Kim Ark. Temporary visitors and unlawful present non-citizens are not domiciled here. They are domiciled in foreign countries. The domicile of an individual is his true, fixed, and permanent home. That's what we saw in Wong Kim Ark. That's what Trump's executive order was based upon. The 14th Amendment and its historical background provides additional support for this conclusion, saying while children born here of U.S. citizens and permanent residents are entitled to birthright citizenship, children of parents whose presence is either unlawful or lawful but temporary or not. Two things have to occur to create citizenship. One, birth locally within the dominion of the sovereign, and secondly, within the allegiance of the sovereign. So geographically inside and politically allied with the nation state. Now, the phrase born in the United States codifies the traditional requirement of birth within the territory, part one. Part two, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, talks about the allegiance. It matches the common law. And everybody, even during the congressional debates, understood it that way. You don't get to break the law and then get a benefit of this. During the debate, this guy, Wade, was also talking about it. Supreme Court in New Jersey, back in 1895, said the same thing, linked birthright citizenship to domicile from the parent. And it's been contemplated a lot, but it's just been interpreted inappropriately right now until Trump came in and said no more of this. The government's reading of the citizenship clause respects the principle that we just discussed, and their reading violates it. As a sovereign nation, the United States has a constitutional power to forbid the entrance of foreigners within its dominion. And the Supreme Court has resisted reading this in a manner that would inhibit the ability to address this dual nationality. And we do tolerate dual citizenship in some situations. We probably shouldn't. Plaintiffs' readings of this invites much broader problems. And so we should win. Wong Kim Ark gives us the case law that we need. Domiciled and residenced in the United States, Wong Kim Ark's parents were lawfully here permanently. And so if you just review the relevant history, you can reach the same conclusions. After about a decade after Wong Kim Ark was decided, the DOJ likewise explained the decision goes no further than addressing children of foreigners domiciled in the United States. Is the mere act of birth of a child on American soil enough for citizenship? Even the DOJ said it was not held in Wong Kim Ark. That's not how it works. So all of their other arguments failed, and their precedent is bad. In short, Trump's executive order says the citizenship clause means subject to the jurisdiction thereof, which means lawful or permanent status. Therefore, assuming that they have standing and can even bring this properly, you should grant summary judgment to us. So either dismiss the case and we win, or grant summary judgment and we win. Signed by the Assistant U.S. Attorney out there for the Civil Division in Washington, D.C., Heather Graham Oliver. Nice filing in a motion to dismiss. And so this is a big one for them because this was part of the plan, right? You bring in 20 million illegals, then they have a bunch of babies, so you can't really do much about that since they're all citizens, and then the children will, of course, vote in alignment of interests of their family, familial structure. Obviously, they're human beings, and so all of those interests will be kind of smuggled into our country in a couple generations. And now, if this is stopped, right, if the money that goes and funds all the DNC, the NGOs, and the USAID money and all that stuff, if all that grift is cut off, if the Democrat vote rigging is cut off via the illegal alien invasion, and all of this is slowly starting to unwind, and birthright citizenship is no longer valid, we might have a real chance of saving our country. So we got James Comer, who's also working on this in Washington, D.C., and he says illegals should not be allowed to vote in Washington, D.C. Apparently they can.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise in support of H.R. 884, which prohibits individuals who are not citizens of the United States from voting in elections in the District of Columbia. On November 21st, 2022, the D.C. government enacted the Local Resident Voting Rights Amendment Act, permitting non-citizen residents to vote in D.C. local elections. This includes
Okay, we talked about it. Like they're hiring them as cops, hiring them in various administrative positions, like as ALJ, like administrative law judges in certain locations, giving them the right to vote in certain city elections. Now, in the state capitol, non-citizens can go and run Washington, D.C. Incredible.
Legal immigrants and even foreign diplomats whose interests may be opposed to the interests of Americans. This radical change to Washington, D.C.'s election laws upset lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. For instance, Washington, D.C. Mayor Bowser withheld her signature on the act, something she has done only a handful of times. In last Congress, when an identical bill was brought to the floor, 262 members voted in favor, including 52 of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. Unfortunately, the Senate refused to take up this bipartisan, common sense bill to maintain election integrity in our nation's capital. The right to vote is a defining privilege of American citizenship. Diluting that right by extending it to non-citizens, whether here legally or illegally, undermines the voice of Washington, D.C. residents. Article 1 of the Constitution grants Congress exclusive jurisdiction over the nation's capital, and the House Oversight Committee is charged with ensuring responsible governance in the district, including its election laws. I urge my colleagues to support Representative August Pfluger's bill to restore common sense protection and ensure that only United States citizens have the right to vote in local D.C. elections. I reserve the balance of my time.
Crazy that this is even a debate. It's like in D.C., they want foreigners to run the government. It's like, why don't they? Okay, so should they just become president too and just eliminate the natural born requirement? Now, here's Homeland telling us that under the Biden administration, the political scheme allowed that they were operating allowed hundreds of thousands of unvetted, so not only the people who came in illegally, but they brought them in, unvetted aliens to circumvent the traditional parole process. Known terrorists, gang members, convicted murderers have all entered this country legally under the program. So there were illegals, and then Joe Biden brought in criminals legally. USCIS has lifted the administrative hold that was placed on asylum, TPS, and adjustment of status applications filed by aliens who were paroled, and telling everybody who's here illegally, if you're here, leave now, use the app, and get out. Now, Caroline Leavitt was asked about the Democrat response to a lot of what Trump is doing, and Jasmine Crockett came up today. Here's how Caroline Leavitt explained her thoughts on Jasmine Crockett.
Here on our homeland as well.
Thank you. And then really quick on Jasmine Crockett, she said, I believe, that Trump supporters are mentally ill before calling for bipartisan support against the president. Can you respond to that, especially considering she's a rising star in the Democrat Party right now?
She is a rising star. It's quite something to behold, actually. I hope that she continues to be a rising star for the Republican Party, at least. I think it's incredibly derogatory to accuse nearly 80 million Americans of mental illness. The last time I checked, Jasmine Crockett couldn't dream of winning such a majority of the public as President Trump did. And the America First movement, which President Trump has built, is filled of hardworking patriots, the forgotten men and women, business owners, law enforcement officers, nurses and teachers, and middle America, as we all know, from where you all grew up, outside of this beltway. That's who makes up this president's movement. And Jasmine Crockett should go to a Trump rally sometime, and she can see it for herself.
She should. She might put on a MAGA hat and join us, but that's unlikely. So audio is a little low on that. My apologies, but we heard what Caroline had to say. Now, elsewhere, we had Tom Homan out explaining, we're going to continue to round up illegals. Don't you even worry about it.
Well, I don't think it's much reversal, Stuart, but I think what the status is right now is we continue operations on farms and hotels. However, we do it in a prioritized manner. A lot of worksite enforcement operations are based on criminal information, criminal investigations, such as forced labor, such as trafficking, and such as, tax fraud and money laundering. So we'll still do these operations, but they're going to be based on priority, just like our at-large criminal operations based on priority. Criminals first, national security threats first, but when it comes to hotels and worksite enforcement operations, we prioritize them and put the criminal operations first. So they're not off the table, especially when it comes to a criminal investigation.
All right, Tom Homan, I got one more from him. Here's what he said.
There has to be No, it doesn't worry me. I mean, the president got elected on two things: securing the border and running the deportation operation. Historically, look, we can't send a message to the whole world. You can enter this country illegally, which is a crime. You can have your hearing at great taxpayer expense and lose and get an order removal. But don't worry, we're not looking for you. If that's the message we send to the whole world, you're never going to fix the immigration problem. There has to be consequences. We gave millions of people due process under Joe Biden. Let millions of people in. They said, I demand due process. I demand to see a judge. And they had that right. But 90% of them lost. So the immigration judge says, you lose, you must go home. If we don't execute those orders, Stuart, then what the hell are we doing? You might as well shut down the immigration court, because the immigration court doesn't mean anything anymore.
Open the border.
Take the border patrol off the border, because there's no consequences. We're national laws. We got to enforce those laws.
That's what they want. They don't want America to be America anymore. And if you flood America with foreigners from all over the world, then it's no longer America. It's now this melting pot, which was a made-up term invented in the early 1900s. That is ridiculous. We don't want a melting pot of a bunch of people around the world. We want America. Pure ingredients. So come in and join our values, or don't. All right, thank you from Tom Homan. All right, so that's what's happening there. Now let's turn our attention to this story, which came over from the New York Post. in a big story by Miranda Devine that explains just how bad the FBI is. The FBI is even worse than you thought. In fact, they were targeting President Trump, not only in all the cases that we covered here, but they were digging into every nook and cranny to try to come up with any basis for more charges. And they're so cowardly and pathetic that they even went after the J6 choir, because that's the FBI. Total pathetic behavior from weak men. Here is what this story says, courtesy of Miranda Devine, who has an amazing new podcast on YouTube. I recommend you check it out. She said this: the FBI emails that she got her hands on exclusively shows that they were targeting Trump, revealing that rogue agents and prosecutors in the Biden DOJ were looking for ways to pile on new criminal charges against Trump. You're kidding. This time, based on the choir. 2023 emails, years after this whole thing went down, after January 6th, the Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley, he hasn't published these yet, he revealed exclusively to Miranda, are an example of the nitpicking malice of anti-Trump lawfare that tainted Jack Smith's investigation, which we covered here extensively. Now, can we do some work to nail down Trump's role in this? Quote, writes a prosecutor called J.P. Cooney to DOJ colleagues in March 2023. He sent an email. It was entitled J6 Prisoner Choir /DJT. And he attached a Forbes article saying Trump collaborates on songs with the J6 defendants. You see them here. A video clip posted to Rumble showed the men awaiting trial or sentencing singing the national anthem. And the FBI hated this stuff, right? Because they thought, how dare they turn this into a cause? We're the good guys. That we created this operation to try to take out Trump, and so now they have to squelch it. And the song was capturing a lot of attention. I think it was like top of the charts, wasn't it? According to this Forbes article, Trump recorded the Pledge of Allegiance at Mar-a-Lago, and Kash Patel, now the FBI director, how'd that work out for him, and Ed Henry, former Fox News host, were also involved. Kash got asked about this during his confirmations. The profits are routed to an LLC run by Henry, and proceeds are intended for families of incarcerated J6 defendants. But there is apparently a vetting process that says you're excluded if you assaulted police officers. So someone says, I asked Ahmed, probably Ahmed Bassett, another prosecutor who was fired earlier this month, to preserve this last night. Save that article so we can prosecute him. I'll talk to Maria and Aaron and Julia about doing some follow-up here to nail down Trump's role. Over the choir. Cooney also instructed colleagues to look at starting some process on Ed Henry's LLC, presumably a legal process like a subpoena. His email was forwarded to 8 agents and DOJ staff, including notorious anti-Trump special agent called Walter Giardina, who responded 2 days later to say, well, I'm investigating claims about that article. Esther and I are working on this today. We're going to put together our findings at 2 and get something back to you shortly. Giardina was called Agent Zero, part of the overzealous FBI actions involving Trump and Peter Navarro and the J6 riot. It was Giardina's team that arrested Peter Navarro. And he was about to board when he was about to board an airplane. Remember that? They put leg irons on him. They threw him in jail. They could have just issued a summons. Peter Navarro's like 70. Remember that? As to the federal judge, they didn't care. Didn't even care. Giardina was also involved in Operation Crossfire Hurricane, the fake FBI plot to try to stop Trump that was working with Hillary Clinton's campaign. According to this email, Giardina was an initial recipient of the fake Steele dossier and falsely claimed that the Clinton campaign smear was true. It was not true. It was fake. Whistleblowers also told Grassley that Giardina openly stated his desire to investigate Trump, even if it meant false predication. Grassley believes this email chain is another clear example of how federal law enforcement was weaponized, and Grassley is going to continue to release this stuff. So shout out to Grassley, shout out to Miranda for getting the story revealed to us. We had some other senators talking about just how gone Joe Biden is. Here was Senator Eric Schmidt explaining what needs to happen to investigate the Biden FBI, the Biden DOJ, who all was responsible from actually running the government and trying to set up their political opponents at every turn.
Again, over the years, who was actually running the country? You know, having a capable president is actually kind of important in our constitutional republic. It's the one person that's actually elected by the whole country. And so when the president signs something, whether it's a bill or a treaty or a letter, he is speaking on behalf of the American people. Clearly, Joe Biden's decline in his inability to do those things was on full display. You've had whistleblowers come forward saying he couldn't even find the bathroom in the Oval Office. So this was, I think, in my view, a scandal bigger than Watergate. And so in addition to just looking backwards and trying to figure out who was actually running the country, these left-wing radicals who opened up our borders and caused inflation and had a wandering foreign policy, what do we do about it moving forward? How can you have a mechanism actually that would address this? And you know, I've said often that Joe Biden is the worst president this side of Woodrow Wilson. Ironically, you had the same problem 100 years ago with Woodrow Wilson where he was incapacitated and his wife was running the government. That's probably what was happening here too. So this is going to continue, Laura. We're going to continue. We're going to seek documents. One thing that came out of today, we're going to seek documents from the archivist. They're supposed to keep a paper trail of when he actually authorized the auto pen. We'll see if they actually did that or not.
Thank you for digging into that from the Senate. We also saw Senator Britt is also looking into this over from the Judiciary Committee. She said, Democrats love to lecture us about democracy. The truth is, they and the legacy media thwarted democracy by covering up Biden's mental decline and by prosecuting Trump and trying to rig the entire government to try to stop him.
On the Senate Judiciary Committee, which held a hearing to investigate what happened exactly with President Biden and his acuity and whether or not there was a cover-up. What questions do you still have following today's hearing?
Yeah, well, first off, I am incredibly frustrated and disappointed in my Democratic colleagues. This is a moment in time to actually get answers to the questions that we have. It is clear that we had a commander-in-chief who was not in command. It is clear that someone else was making decisions and or covering up for his lack of mental acuity. If we want to ensure that this doesn't happen again, we have to get to the bottom of actually what happened over the past 4 years, and as we've seen, even longer than that. So I'm frustrated, I'm disappointed that they wouldn't come to the table and be a part of the solution moving forward. I think we have to take a look at the 25th Amendment, Section 4 in particular. Is there too much ambiguity there? Do we need to create constraints? Do we need to define what unable means? There's a lot of questions around that. Additionally, there's questions about not just cabinet secretaries and their role in the 25th Amendment and how we put the proper guardrails in place to make sure this doesn't happen again. But there's also a question about senior staff. Look, as a senior staffer myself, you come in and you have a duty and obligation to the country and to the people you serve. And I think we have some real questions for the people who are around him day to day. So I find it incredibly discouraging and truly disgusting that we have an opportunity to get to the bottom of this, to have a conversation, and yet they chose to not show up. So don't lecture me about democracy if you won't come and sit at the table and try to get answers to how we can make sure that this doesn't happen again.
Well, they were complicit in it is the problem. Like, why would the Democrats be outraged about any of this? They were all beneficiaries of it. They got that grift. Okay, Stacey Abrams got like $2 billion. That other dude who pleaded guilty to bribery got like $800 million. Like, they're all in on it. So, like, well, just don't show up. Don't answer any questions about it. It's the smartest strategy in the world. Now, the thing about the Republicans is they are in charge of the Senate. So why don't they just form their own little committee and then start issuing subpoenas? And then when they don't follow those subpoenas, I don't care who it is, bring in Hunter, subpoena Hunter. Questions about whatever, pick a question, pick anything. He said, I'm pardoned. You say, no, you're not from answering questions about these other things. Show up and answer questions. You're not going to get charged with a crime. So come talk to Congress about it, about any of these things. He doesn't show up. That's contempt, just like Liz Cheney and Benny Thompson did for Peter Navarro and Steve Bannon. Do the same thing. It's a process crime. Just don't. Hunter can make his claim. Bannon said, hey, I've got executive privilege. They said, no, we don't care. You're going to prison. So they can do the same thing to all of these Democrats. Jill Biden come in, James Biden. Comer can go through his entire list and have a ton of fun. They can do it in the House too and get to the bottom of it. And when the Democrats dig their heels in, just like the Republicans did Nancy Pelosi just made the whole committee work anyways. Said, I don't care. You have to have a minority chair and minority members on this. She said, oh, no. No. And she put Liz Cheney and Kinzinger on there and called it a legitimate committee. And the media was like, yeah. Jake Tapper, moron, sitting here, indulging in that for months, calling it a legitimate thing. It was totally fake. And now we're going to demand that they help us uncover this. It's like, look, guys, look, I appreciate Katie Britt and Holly and everybody. Holly was here yesterday demanding, I demand Joe Biden release the records. They're not going to release the records. So you're just screaming into the wind. What are you doing? You have power. Do something about it. And start issuing subpoenas and then charge them. Or just charge them now. Where's the state attorney general? Where is the Republican big fanny? Somewhere. Anywhere? Who will just bring a case. Charge Hunter Biden with something. Make him come in, show his pardon, and validate it. And you say, actually, we don't think it's a valid pardon. Why? I'm pardoned. You can't charge me. No, we don't think it's a valid pardon. Yes, it is. Here's our evidence that it's not. Where's your evidence that it is? And get into it. Shift the burden back and forth. No, Judge, it's a fake pardon. Here's our evidence of that. It's invalid. Make him come and rebut it. Or make them show up to Congress and sit there and plead the fifth after every word. One after another. I'm sorry, I plead the fifth. Hunter, every other question, I plead the fifth. I plead the fifth. Fine, do it. Come do it. And if they don't show up, criminal charges, because no one is above the law. All right, so, my friends, what a beautiful stream it has been. Thank you for joining us. Happy Thursday. I hope your week was amazing and you're excited about the close, because tomorrow is Friday. Of course, we're going to come back tomorrow, but now is the time to hear from you. Quick recap if you're just joining us. We had a couple updates, very short, on Iran. Heard from the president, it's going to be 2 weeks, but then heard from Seymour Hersh that it's going to be this weekend. So we'll see. We then talked about the Gavin Newsom case. And in California, the Trump DOJ came back and hit them with an opposition and a response saying that the injunction from the former Chief Justice's younger brother, Breyer, must be denied. And so we read through that. Thought it was a very nice substantive filing before we turned our attention over to the Birthright Citizenship case. And we saw that Rubio and the DOJ have now filed a motion to dismiss. And they said that their executive order is in total compliance with all the precedent. Anybody who says that subject to the jurisdiction means subject to the regulation of is mistaken. And the case law supports our argument. So saying this case brought by the American Pacific American advocates and others should be dismissed, or in the alternative, Trump should win via summary judgment. We had reaction on this and other issues from Comer, who said that non-citizens are voting in D.C. now, or they want to, and they're trying to stop that from happening. We got some other updates, Caroline Leavitt, Tom Homan. And then we saw a great report from Miranda Devine saying that the FBI was trying to target Trump over the choir, the J6 choir, because they're so pathetic. And they probably can't even hum a tune. Pathetic FBI agents. No creativity, no musical skill set, can't even sing Mary Had a Little Lamb. Pathetic. And so because the J6ers sang loudly and proudly the American national anthem, the FBI just had conniption fits all night long. Christopher Wray woke up in cold sweats all night long. J6 protest. God bless America. Just having a hard day, So anyways, so they targeted Trump for that. Obviously, it all backfired. And Trump won. He's the president now. So how'd that work out for you, idiots? All right. So now, my friends, it is time to hear from you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. Happy Thursday. We appreciate all your support. Welcome to new membos. Membos, stick around. We're going to do an after party after the show. And we'll look forward to seeing you there. Hey, Donut, thank you for clipping for us today. Oh, yeah, Kathy Hochul. Yeah, it's a real photo. We got a real photo of Kathy Hochul coming up. No doubt. What's going on? Yeah, it's going to be fun. Kathy Hochul. I love illegals. $50 million for illegal aliens. Kathy, sorry, just got out of my Botox session. Having a tough time right now. Kathy Hochul. All right, what's going on? Hey, it's from Friends. When you know tomorrow's Friday and it's always going to be a good time or something like that. What is that song? Or is that Cheers? I don't remember. Ravicus shared this. Please let Ron Paul's wisdom pass to the next generation. We appreciate Ron Paul. Yeah, we miss Ron Paul. Hey, Brandon Lesko, 25 months as a membo. Brandon, let's go, man, says, whoa, baby, it's game time. Tax credit coming soon. We got more babies coming. Brandon, thank you for being a membo, man, for 25 months. It's a long time. We've been through some serious stuff together. We appreciate you being here. We got this one from Ravicus. Well, this is right. Watching the Watcher shines the big, beautiful spotlight on evil everywhere. It's true. These are little communists here. It's kind of an anthropomorphization of communists running around. Each according to his ability, from each according to his means. Constantly, little maniacs. Hey, concert chick. You just want to kick them off your heels. Concert chick, what's up? Oh, man. Hey, Watcher fam, missed y'all. Ended up back in the hospital Tuesday morning. Sorry to hear that, concert chick. Finally feeling well enough to watch from my hospital room. I'm slowly on the mend. It's good. But family always helps. Shout out to Concert Chick, my friends. We're going to send you some good healing energy and love, Concert Chick. Sorry to hear you're in the hospital room, but very glad to hear you're on the mend. Thanks for checking in. Thanks for saying hello so that we can all have an opportunity to send some good vibes your way. And hopefully you're out of there in no time. What's up, Doan? Your question today on the origins of mythology conjures how some think the gods were primeval superior beings called Nephilim or the Watchers. Whoa, don't. That's pretty esoteric and deep down there. So we were talking about this morning. We were talking about the sacred relationship between mankind and horses in particular. And we came because our Gigam Geegum, our meme smith extraordinaire, had to end and had to put down her horse after a long, I think, 32-year relationship, something like that. So it was, kind of a sacred and somber moment this morning. But we were asking about horses and how they have this special connection, and I've seen them used in rehabilitation and, anxiety treatments and all sorts of things. And there's like this deep connection. And we were talking about how centaurs, not minotaurs are the bull, centaurs are the horse, and asking about the origin of that. Like why, and we go through the Wikipedia article, it's all over the place. All the different cultures all kind of have this creature. Where'd that come from? Why is that symbol so repetitive throughout all these different societies? Strange. Hey, Digger1420 rated our stream. Thank you for doing that. In the house, we appreciate you. Knox Bierman, what's up? Says, hey, happy Thursday, all. Cy Hirsch has been around since Vietnam War. He is the hero who broke the My Lai massacre when I was a kid. Dang, is that right? Wild. Yeah, so that guy's been around forever. He's got pretty good intel, I've seen. So that's like, all right, well, if he's hearing something. And again, these might all be plans. Like Trump has to give the okay, baby. He might just say, no. Now watch this drive. Something like that. Who knows? Hey, Spuds, what's up? You know what's good for swollen eyes? Hey, Gavin, your eyes look a little swollen. He says, yes, they are. I've been crying about insurrection in my state. You know what's good for swollen eyes? What's that, says Gavin. Ice. Gavin jumps out the window. Linda Walling. What's up, Linda Walling? Thank you for joining up. Shout out to that very spacey, dancy rhino. We appreciate you, Linda. Thank you for the dono. We got Mizzy M. Hey, thanks for staying on top of this all, Rob. It wears me out listening. Can't imagine all the work you do in reporting it all. Thank you, Mizzy M. I'm sorry to wear you out. This show's not supposed to wear you out. It's supposed to, be enjoyable. But we appreciate you joining us, Mizzy M. There's a lot going on, but we have a country to save. So we're happy to get worn out together. Buffalo Betsy. Hey, Laura Loomer is now attacking Theo Vaughn. Is she? For daring to voice his opinion, which he is not enthusiastic about war with Iran. And she weaponizes his past struggles with addiction and recovery to insult him. Whoa, Buffalo Betsy. Unloading on Laura Loomer. And Laura Loomer dropping on Theo Vaughn. Wild. All right. So, yeah, things are getting very spicy out there. Shout out to Laura Loomer and Theo Vaughn. I don't know what they're getting into, but it sounds, yeah. So, okay. It's a spicy conversation, but we appreciate the conversation. G-Men, we the people are the militia. That's right. And we have to protect our country if we're called to serve. All the feds in the chat just went nuts. Thanks for that, G-Men. Hey, Jennifer says Senator Alex Padilla is an anchor baby. He was admitted it and being a dreamer back in 16 and 17. Thanks for another great show, Rob. Thank you, Jennifer. The news felt a little slow today, honestly. At least the cases felt a little slow. Sometimes you're like, all right, well, let's talk. This is interesting enough. We'll talk about it. Spuds. Hey, here's a real photo of Kathy Hochul. I saw her. This is like a screenshot, I think, from CNN. It's real. Kathy Hochul, now Picasso's new supermodel. Her safe word is I Gore. Okay. It's not a stroke, okay? It's not a stroke. This is not a stroke thing. This is Botox or something. I don't know what it is. Hey, Rebecca Koo, thank you for bringing in 5 new members. What's going on? Gerald Campos is here. Saintly Beginnings. What's up? Brett Montgomery. Delar Finn is here. DP 001 gifted members, courtesy of Rebecca. Rebecca, thank you for being a membo, and thank you for bringing in 5 new members. Very nice of you. And we'll see everybody in the after party. What's up, Vegas woman 702? I always knew the Vegas area code because I used to get a lot of calls from people from Vegas who would call our law firm and they would say, I got caught speeding, criminally speeding. They'd want to hire us. Always 702 numbers. And what's interesting in Vegas is apparently in Vegas, it costs like $100 to hire a traffic ticket lawyer. In Arizona, it's like not that at all. It's like thousands to hire a traffic ticket lawyer, depending on the jurisdiction. But a lot of people coming from Vegas were coming, like through Kingman and stuff. And you're going, oh gosh. So these Vegas people would call, like, hey, I got a speeding ticket, criminal speeding, class 3 misdemeanor, whatever. They'd call and say, how much for representation? Like, oh, Kingman? Oh, it's like, I don't know. It's like 3.5 hours away from Phoenix. So I mean, if it goes to a trial and all, it's talking like, I don't know, $5,000 to start, probably 15 at the end of the day. People go from Vegas, what? Go nuts. What? It's like, yeah, it's like $5,000 to start, $4,000 maybe if you want a deal. They go, oh my gosh, they're expecting like $99. And so they would always lose it. So the 702 numbers were a ton of fun. Anyways, that's a little anecdote. Thank you, Vegas woman, for 702. What's up? Christine Huff, Along is here. Bob Gulick, what's up? Juan Epstein, VB Quad in the house. And all brought in courtesy of Vegas woman 702 in the house. Doan says, the Indians laughed at how the colonists drank more corn than they ate. So whiskey was a major source of income then, like it is now. Interesting details. Doan, number 3 in the chat. Amazing. Great to see you, Doan. Jennifer, hey, do the Dodgers support ICE or illegals? 29 months as a member, Jennifer. That's a long time. Thank you for that. Coming up on 30. I did see that I think there was a conflict in communication on that. Homeland, if you look at their X account, they said we weren't in the Dodger Stadium. We weren't even there. They said that they had, they sent people in through the parking lot and it was just unrelated to enforcement. Like they were just like stopping to check their phone or something. They weren't turned away, Homeland said. The Warrior says, hey, amazing thought. I cannot think of a time when the National Guard has had to deploy to a Republican city. It's always Democrat cities. Yeah, which I think is just how they operate, right? They just turn into kind of giant cesspools of bureaucracy and balloonists. Chubby Stubby on Local says, Pocahontas wants him to divulge maximum numbers of troops that we can safely deploy in a public hearing where enemies can hear and then plan accordingly. She's a traitor. Thank you for that, Chubby. Says, Cardinal O'Flanagan, by APAA logic, if a couple breaks into someone's home, pops out a baby, well, that's the baby's house now. It's true, Cardinal. That's what they say. That's what they say. It's ours now because we're subject to the jurisdiction of the house since the walls are around us. Hey, what's up? Diane K. Lacey. Dear Ted, attacking Iran is not the same thing as killing Soleimani, okay? He was 1, the leader of an FTO, 2, enemy combatant major general in Iraq, a theater of war, with U.S. troops still deployed there. From Diane K. Lacey. Yeah, Ted's having to battle it right now, too. We got King of Biltong with a couple of comments here about what you can get at biltongusa.com. If you care to check it out, you can read what is available there. Cardinal O'Flanagan says, the absolute irony of justices ignoring the Constitution in order to take jurisdiction, in order to correct claim constitutional crises, is astounding. Yeah, well, they're saving American democracy in their eyes and stopping a dictator called Trump. So they'll do whatever they want, even if it means wrecking the judiciary and the country. Dale Miller, what's up? Hey, just wonder if these naturalized citizens know that they can be denaturalized, a process called denaturalization. A long list of ways. One of those is assaulting a federal officer. From Dale Miller. Actually undo it. Says, denaturalization, Rob, do you think this could start happening? Maybe someday you could go over it in depth. I don't know anything about the process, if it is one. And most importantly, like, I think you're going to have a real problem with that just on due process, alone. How do you start to take away citizenship from somebody once it's been granted, unless you can invalidate the gifting of it? I don't know. I don't know much about it, Dale Miller, but thanks for even flagging it. Denaturalization. Maybe it's a thing. Hey, Diane K. Lacey, and most importantly, he was personally responsible for the murder and the horrific maiming of thousands of U.S. soldiers in Iraq with explosively formed penetrators that tore through our armored vehicles. So in other words, Soleimani is not the same thing. Now, right, if it is like Soleimani, if Trump drops a couple B-52 bunker busters or whatever, and that's it, and the whole thing is like forgotten about, okay, well, that was a good move. Right, Soleimani, there were a lot of people screeching about World War III at that time, and it didn't happen. So if we can do that again, all right, well, maybe it's not World War III, but that's the conversation that we want to have. We're no longer in this phase of just like, trust the science because it involves Iran. What? The bureaucracy of our government has lied to us about everything. Everything. But they're not going to lie to us about Iran and the fact that they've got a nuclear weapon like 2 seconds about from blowing off. But everything else they lied about. Except this. Got it. Chat with me. What's up? Thank you for that. So if Congress decides Biden auto pen wasn't legal, what judge is going to rule against them? A lot, I would say. Yeah, I mean, it depends. It depends on the judges. Like, I don't think they're beholden to Congress in any way. I think that there are judges right now who are ruling against Congress. Like, they're ruling against congressional law because Trump is effectuating it in a way that they don't appreciate. I think the bigger question would be what judge would invalidate a pardon, or what judge would invalidate one of those. That's going to be the bigger hurdle. You're going to have a bunch of judges who just presume the validity of Biden's documents, and they would never give that benefit to any Republican. Leonard S. Hey, Rob, could the Democratic Party disappear like the Federalist Party disappeared around 1820? Yeah, parties come and go. I mean, like the Whigs and stuff, right? The Bull Moose Party with Teddy Roosevelt. Like, they kind of come and go. And I think, personally, I think there's a lot of institutional momentum for the Democrats. And the pendulum will probably swing back, their way at some point. I don't know how long it's going to take. Like, they might be in the outs for a while because they lied to everybody, like through their teeth directly to their voters multiple times for 4 years. So it's pretty bad. And they should no longer be considered a reputable party. They're filled with liars and bureaucrats. It's beyond salvation. What's going on? Lori Falconer. Thank you, Lori, for bringing in Broken Prophet in the house. We appreciate that from Lori Falconer. 200-watt studio. Let me check. 200-watt studio. Hey, Republicans, all talk and no action. Oh, my gosh. Who's this weird dude on the screen? No prosecutions, no arrests. People like Cruz, Bondi, Hawley, etc. grandstand, but we know they have no follow-through. They talk really well. Like, they say a lot of really good stuff on the screen. It's really good. It's a really good one. They sound great. They sound like they're really competent and mad. They're very mad, too. Can't believe this. Well, if you do something about it, it's how I feel. This is the Kathy Hochul. That's the Kathy Hochul. That's it. It's what she looks like. What's going on with her face? Why is it falling off? She didn't have a stroke, I'm pretty sure. 200-watt studio. Hey, Republicans are all talk, no actions. Okay, the prosecution's no arrest. Right, exactly. Says people like Cruz, Bondi, Hawley, they grandstand. We all know they have no follow through. It's like we hear this all the time. Yeah, it's just constant. We're going to get you the documents. We're going to release these files. We're going to open investigations. Things are coming. Just hang tight. All right. Lori Falconer, what's up? Thank you, Lori, for becoming a membo and for joining us. We appreciate you doing that. ELZ, what's up? Here's top 7 reasons why I love and heart watching The Watchers. 1, the loving, caring, competent, and generous community here. It's a great number 1. I'll tell you that. It's a great number 1. We have an amazing community. I'm so grateful for you. We've got 2, your energy and enthusiasm in presenting complex legal concepts. Well, that's nice. Your ability to admit easily when you are not sure about something. Yeah, there's a lot there too. The meme smith's rapid procurement ability. We love our meme smiths. The good-natured jousting that happens in the chats. 2 streams per day. And my opportunity to help. $7 for luck and love. You're amazing, Yelzad. Thank you for that very nice list there. Yeah, we have the best meme smiths. I am not sure about a lot of things. And we appreciate you being here. Really, thank you for the support. It's a symbiotic thing. I mean, your energy fuels my energy. And I genuinely mean that. Like, there are some days when I'm like, oh, I'm tired, my head hurts or whatever. Something's off, whatever. Like, you know how it is. We're humans. And I come here and I see your fun comments in the chat and you sometimes dunking on each other, dunking on me. It's just great. Hey, Rob, what's up? And I remember, we love America. We have a country to save, so get to work. Rob, what's up? 2 Mexican festivals in my area announced they were canceled for some reason. Don't think it was because of the heat. There's plenty of ice here to keep things cool, but Quad Cam, what's up? Says, okay, so tourists can't have citizen kids, but if those tourists overstay their tourist visa, then they suddenly can have citizen kids? Make it make sense. Yeah, that's a great point. So you actually can break the law and get a better benefit rather than following the law, right? See, like the perverse incentives. That's why these rules make no sense. And they never did. That was never the interpretation. Like, they weren't idiots back in the 1800s. They figured this out. It was for a whole different situation. And now judges are saying that foreign invaders should have permanent status, essentially, via their kids. Ridiculous. My friends, such great comments. Thank you for those. And great to see everybody. Welcome to new membos. Hopefully something happens about Kathy Hochul's face and she gets that fixed tonight or tomorrow, something. But my friends, we will leave it there on the day. Members, stick around. We're going to do an after party. So on YouTube, go back to the main channel homepage, hit the refresh. As soon as the song ends, we'll come back and we'll see you on the after party. I'll also drop a link to the after party for members in the current chat. So come check it out. Locals, friends, just stick around. And then, of course, we'll see you. But it has been a beautiful stream. I want to thank our amazing mods and meme smiths. Shout out to Donut and to John for clipping for us, holding the fort down. Neuro D, Gigam, Dog Digger, Janek over on the Rumbles. We got Just Rhonda Elliott and Gigam, our mod smith, modding the fort down for us. My friends, it's been a beautiful stream. Thank you so much for being here. Of course, we're going to pause here for the evening, but we are coming back here tomorrow, and we're going to get into it again. And in order to do that appropriately, we are going to need to see you right back here so that together, with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. Make it a beautiful night, my friends. Sleep very well. I'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching, my beautiful friends. Now it's that time where the stream must end. You brought the heat with every chat and line. Together we expose corruption. One more time we dove in the truth where the media hides. Lit up the lies with receipts on all sides. The fight isn't over, but we made them sweat. We ain't done yet, no, not just yet. Because together we are watching the watchers. Truth on our side. Watching the watchers. We won't be denied. those lies are just today's news, but here we see through